we have a stamp of approval by him, the seal of promise called the Holy Spirit that guarantees the inheritance we have in the kingdom of heaven. What ended up giving me pause was thinking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because as I spent time with this Lord that I had neglected during this journey, I was reminded that he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I was reminded that he gave a promise to Abraham. He gave a promise to Abraham in Genesis 12 that, hey, he was going to bless the world through him. And the way that he was going to bless the world through him is that Abraham was going to have a son. But then time went on and Abraham wouldn't have no kids. So he got a second opinion. And he said, here, well, I know that the Lord wants to do something good, so let me take it upon myself with my own hands and let me further that plan down the line. And so he grabs his servant Hagar and conceives with her, all the while not trusting the promise given to the Lord. And so now what I think a mistake that we make when we read that passage is we remove Abraham and we put ourselves in that exact narrative when that's a story. We learn the character of God through that story, but that story is not meant for you to cut around Abraham's figure and then put your face in it. It's meant to tell you something. One, we see that this history, this story, the history of this world is not ours, it's God's. It's God's story. It's God's narrative of his reconciliation with his people. That's one. Number two, we also see that the Lord does not forsake his promises. Never. Number three, or maybe not number three of what we see in that. So with those two things that we see in that, where do we go? The next thing to go is, what is the promise that we need to be remembering? Is it me and Talani's job in the moment to say, hey, the Lord promised Abraham a son, so that means that he's promised us children? No. It doesn't mean that. Mm-hmm. It means that the promises he has given us will remain. What are some of those promises? That he'll never forsake us, nor leave us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That we, through Jesus Christ, have been adopted as sons and daughters into his family, where we've received every spiritual blessings in the heavens, Paul says in Ephesians. It means that we have a stamp of approval by him, the seal of promise called the Holy Spirit that guarantees the inheritance we have in the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. Those promises are what get us through the brokenness of today. Mm-hmm. He hasn't promised you a job. He hasn't promised you children. He hasn't promised you a spouse who loves you well. He hasn't promised you a spouse. But he has promised that he is the perfect groom. He has promised that once you are his child, nothing will change it. He has promised that all work done in order for you to be deemed righteous is done perfectly through Jesus Christ.